welcome back to another episode of Next Week with Jeff Durbin. I am Jeff Durbin, and we are talking today about what actually a lot of people are talking about today, and that is climate change. What was it before? Was it global cooling? Was that right? Yeah? Global cooling, yes. And then it was global warming, and now they've just sort of landed in the middle now and used a term, a phrase that really could be anything, right? It's really hot outside. That's because climate change. It's really cold outside. It's because climate change, obviously, idiot. So the big buzzword, especially, actually, did you guys all see in the Democratic debates? You guys could see those? Yes? Yeah? You guys feel free. The audience, nobody watching this can hear you. Yes? Yeah? Okay. Nobody watched the Democratic debates? It must be Apologia Church. So anyway, if you saw the Democratic debates, there was a lot of them. Was it me, or was there like too many? Like way more than usual, is it? I don't know. So they had all of the Democratic nominees and everything else, so people who wanted to become the next Democratic president. And I think every single debate was filled with sort of pandering towards the Hispanic vote. So the first one that was cringe, I highly encourage these cringe moments for you. Look up the Spanish speaking in the Democratic debates over the last couple of months. It was epic cringe. One would try to start talking and get half of his thing in Spanish or Espanol, and then the next person would try to outdo it, and then they try to get even more like Spanish sounding, like even more like they were rolling everything as much as they possibly could. It just total pandering. It's such cringe. But so that was one thing, and then another thing which was typical of Democrat position. Would be sort of like, let's give everything away. So each person was standing up every week saying like, well, I'm going to give everything away. I'm going to give everyone income and health care and everything, and like sort of flowers out of a hat. Everyone's like, and how are you going to pay for that? Well, we really don't know. And I think they looked at one person's plan. It would cost trillions and trillions they never would get it. But promises made, I guess, promises not kept. So the next thing was climate change. Was the big deal in all the Democratic debate stuff was climate change. Everybody mentioned climate change. If it wasn't the LGBT stuff, it was climate change. And the assumption now is that the world is going to basically blow up. The world is going to be over. Some people say we only have a couple of months before there's like a no coming back position. And some people say we have 10 to 12 years. But basically, from their perspective, foundationally, climate change is a real thing, and it's going to devastate humanity, and we are getting past the point, or coming to the point, where there's no return. And so it's just assumed now, at least with one party, that climate change is the single most important thing we need to deal with. And so we have someone very special for you today as a guest, and he is Dr. Cal Beisner. He's with Cornwall Alliance, and you can get there at cornwallalliance.org. He's the founder and national spokesman. And Dr. Beisner, welcome to Next Week with Jeff Durbin, brother.
Thanks very much, Jeff. Great to be with you.
Absolutely. So as we start, tell us about Cornwall Alliance. What is it, and what are you doing?
Well, I'll start with what we're doing. My wife tells people the simple way is we're trying to save the planet from the people who are trying to save the planet.
All right.
To put a little meat on the bones there, we're a network of just under 70 evangelical Christian scholars, all committed to the authority of the Bible and all committed to the gospel of Jesus Christ. And our mission is to educate the public and policymakers on three things simultaneously and interwoven. The first of those is biblical earth stewardship, which is not the same thing as environmentalism, because it's rooted in biblical worldview, theology, and ethics, and it uses really outstanding science and economics to understand what the problems are and how we can work to solve them. The second is economic development for the very poor around the world. We're not talking about help for this individual here or that family there or immediate disaster relief. What we're talking about is what are the things that are indispensable to lifting whole societies out of poverty and keeping them out of poverty. And we see two basic answers to that. The first is a set of social institutions, private property rights, entrepreneurship, free trade, limited government, the rule of law. The second is access to abundant, affordable, reliable energy. And historically, and for good reasons in terms of physics and engineering and economics, the best sources that we have for that are coal, oil, and natural gas, fossil fuels, and nuclear and hydro. And then, so you put those social institutions together with the abundant, affordable, reliable energy, and you can lift and keep whole societies out of poverty. Without either one of those two things, you can't. And then the third area in our educational ministry is the gospel of Jesus Christ, by which people can be reconciled by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone, with our holy God. And with that gospel comes the whole biblical worldview, along with biblical theology and ethics. And we recognize that fallen human beings are going to be most likely to be good stewards of God's earth, to do what we're commanded in Genesis 1:28 to do, which is to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion over everything in it. We're going to be good stewards only to the extent that we are reconciled with God, learn to think his thoughts after him, learn to understand his world the way he designed it, the way he has providentially sustained it. And so we work to educate on all three of those things simultaneously. We produce scholarly papers, major lengthy studies, videos of various sorts. We have a YouTube channel, Cornwall Alliance for the Stewardship of Creation. We have a Facebook page. We publish 2 or 3 times a week e-newsletter. And as a matter of fact, your listeners ought to know that for the month of November, we have a special deal going on. If someone will subscribe to our newsletter online at cornwallalliance.org and then make a donation of literally any size, no matter how small, using our online donation link, and ask for the booklet Clear Thinking About Climate Change by
someone brilliant.
Warren Cole Smith. Sorry about that. I am getting on in age here. Warren Cole Smith has done a wonderful little booklet that we published called Clear Thinking About Climate Change. If they'll do that, we'll send them a free copy as our way of saying thank you, and 100% of the donation will be tax deductible.
Well, right on. So you are trying to save the earth from those trying to save the earth. So the big part of the discussion in the national debates, and of course it'll be part of the future debates of whoever becomes the official Republican and Democratic person, guy or lady, the issue of climate change. Now, I mentioned at the beginning there that we've gone from global cooling to global warming to climate change. People say that we are now hitting a spot where it's we can't return. It's going to be the end of human life. It's disastrous consequences. We've got all of our famous talking heads now, one of them being a young girl with a delicious accent, by the way. And biblical earth stewardship is what you're talking about. So how come, Dr. Beisner, you're not just a nutty Christian putting a spin on things? Because you're saying biblical earth stewardship. Isn't that just liberal Christianity, Dr. Beisner?
Well, absolutely not.
Okay.
Liberal Christianity doesn't take the Bible seriously.
That's right.
Do. We get our marching orders from Scripture. And so when we look at Genesis 1:28, for example, in which God blesses Adam and Eve and says to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion over everything in it, what we do is we look at what does the context there indicate this sort of dominion should be. And we root it in God's own dominion because we're made in his image. Verses 26 and 27 of Genesis 1 tell us that God made us in his image, made us male and female. And so we ask, well, what's the image of God like? We look at the earlier verses in Genesis 1 and we see God made everything out of nothing. He created the heavens and the earth. He brought light out of darkness. He brought order out of chaos. He brought life out of non-life. He brought abundant life, varied life out of limited life. He told each form of life to be fruitful and multiply and fill its niche in nature. And God, at every juncture, assessed what he had done and called it good. So God makes moral judgments. He makes rational judgments. He has control over everything, and he favors order and life and truth and love, things like that. So that's what should characterize our dominion, which is why we sort of summarize biblical dominion or biblical earth stewardship as men and women created in God's image, laboring lovingly together to enhance the fruitfulness, the beauty, and the safety of the earth to the glory of God and the benefit of our neighbors. So really, we're addressing the two great commandments, to love God and to love neighbor.
That's excellent. That is excellent, Dr. Beisner. Very, very good. So when you there's so much to get to in terms of the economic development part. You mentioned coal, and that's just bad today, and I'm going to talk about that in comparison with solar energy. But give us some more in terms of biblical earth stewardship. When we talk about dominion, caring for God's creation, loving God and loving neighbor, so being concerned with creation itself, we tend to take radical different positions. Well, let's say, for example, we could see somebody who is coming with a false narrative about the future of the world. You know, we're hitting this eclipse moment, and there's no turning back, and the world's going to blow up, and humanity's gone. And so Christians will tend to sort of overcorrect on that and react the opposite direction to say, you know, who really cares? You know, we're getting raptured out of here anyways. You know, it's all going to hell in a handbasket. What do I care about the earth for? So when you say biblical earth stewardship, Dr. Beisner, what's that look like?
Well, first off, of course, whatever your eschatology might be, you know that Jesus clearly told us that none of us knows when he's coming back. We don't know whether it's going to be before this interview is over or 10,000 years from now. And our call from God in terms of what is revealed to us, which is not when Jesus is coming back, is to cultivate and guard the earth that he's made us, given us dominion over. Now, I think we might be helped by just simply looking at how our approach contrasts with that of most of the environmental movement.
Okay.
Most environmentalists come at these issues from either a secular, atheistic, materialistic worldview or an Eastern pantheistic worldview.
That's right.
For the secularists, matter and energy and motion is all that exists. And of course, the ultimate consequence of that is that they wind up worshiping the universe itself as if it were God. So interestingly enough, atheism and pantheism tend toward the same results.
I like you, Dr.
For the secularist, nature is all that is. For the pantheist, it's not that there's no God, it's that God is everything. Yeah. And so again, we wind up worshiping nature. For the Christian, we recognize that there's a hierarchy, that God is the creator who is utterly distinct from his creation, who made it all out of nothing, who rules over it, and who made mankind in his image and gave us dominion, called us to be his representatives ruling the earth. And so we have a moral basis for what we think. We also have a rational basis. You know, both secular naturalism and pantheism actually tend toward irrationalism. For naturalism, for example, the idea that matter and energy and motion is all that is, well, you can't sustain any epistemology, any rationality that way, because matter and energy don't think. You know, right. When two molecules collide with each other, they don't exactly sit down and have a cup of coffee and talk about, okay, now where do you want to go after this? No, they just exchange energy and shoot off in different directions, and that's it. As C.S. Lewis put it in the chapter, The Problem of Naturalism, in his wonderful book, Miracles, naturalism really is the argument that there is no such thing as argument, right. Which is that's rather right. Self-refuting.
That's right.
Pantheism, in turn, thinks that God is everything. Well, if that's the case, how is it that God disagrees with himself? Because I'm not a pantheist, you're not a pantheist. There are a whole lot of people who aren't pantheists. And people disagree on all sorts of other things as well. So apparently God is more than just a multiple personality disorder. He's got billions of personalities. That doesn't lead to anything very rational either. But instead, Christianity, because it believes that a rational God designed an orderly universe to be understood by rational human beings made in his image, we have the only worldview that can really sustain scientific and other rational activities. And as a matter of fact, science arose historically in only one time and only one place, medieval Europe. And that was because the biblical worldview dominated medieval Europe so much.
That's right.
And insofar as science is continuing to be reasonably rational, it's living off of that epistemological capital. And we're actually seeing the breakdown in it as postmodernism and deconstructionism take over more and more in the sciences. And we're seeing what's called post-normal science, where basically science becomes the handmaiden of political ideologies, and real objective empirical evidence no longer is so important, but instead you just simply go through the motions of science to make it appear that science supports what you want in terms of your political agenda.
Right. So in that line of thinking, the Christian worldview provides the foundation to make a meaningful appeal to earth stewardship in the first place. We have a foundation for rational thinking, rational inquiry. We have a foundation for science. We have something that satisfies the preconditions of intelligibility for science, laws of logic, human, so ultimate oughts and ethics and all those things. So we have a basis to be concerned about the future, to be concerned about other image bearers of God or other human beings in this context, as we talk about it. So we have a basis to care at all. Humanistic reasoning doesn't really have a basis to care about the plight of humanity anywhere. What one bag of stuff does to another one is irrelevant. Ultimately, that's what we're getting at. So when we talk about biblical earth stewardship, let's get to some key issues. So the people that are shouting climate change today are essentially saying, hey, look at this massive island of plastic in the ocean. They're saying, look at the ice caps, they're melting. We have the CO2 problem. We have a problem with all of these fossil fuels and coal, and we're burning gas and all these things, and we're destroying the planet, Dr. Beisner. That's all we're doing. So are they wrong? Like what's...
Well, Jeff, all of these things have some roots in reality. Lies don't readily attract people unless they've got some little bit of truth mixed in with them. So, for example, the plastic in the Pacific Ocean, the Great Pacific Gyre is how people refer to it. There are plastic particles in the ocean there, and frankly in lots of other places too. But the most popular photograph used to illustrate this is of a man in a canoe surrounded by massive amounts of plastic garbage floating on the water all around him. Now, this is to illustrate the plastic in the Great Pacific Gyre. But now the Great Pacific Gyre is way out in the middle of the Pacific, hundreds to thousands of miles from any land. You know where that photograph was taken?
Where?
In Manila Harbor in the Philippines.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
It rather exaggerates the situation. Now, in the real Great Pacific Gyre, yes, there are some almost microscopic and some truly microscopic bits of plastic, but they are, for the most part, not visible to the naked eye. And because plastic is biologically inert, the fish and other marine life that ingest that plastic are in fact unharmed by it. It passes right through their systems. Now, do I think that we should be trying to find ways to limit plastic pollution and the dumping of plastics into the oceans? Absolutely, I think so.
Right.
But we always have to be asking for careful quantification to measure the real risks involved from various things. And actually, the risks from plastic pollutions in the oceans are pretty small. I still think that they can be reduced significantly. Recently, a new ship was designed that literally vacuums that stuff up and pulls it right out of the ocean, out of the water, and then can reuse that plastic, recycle it into other materials.
Nice.
So that's the one example. Now, on climate change, the truth is carbon dioxide, which we emit when we burn fossil fuels. Carbon dioxide is an infrared absorbing gas. Infrared is heat. When energy comes to the Earth from the sun, it comes in the light spectrum. When it strikes the surface of the Earth, or plants, or ice, or water, and whatnot, so a great deal of that bounces back out towards space. If that didn't happen, the Earth would just keep getting hotter and hotter, and it would soon be unlivable. But if we had no greenhouse gases, no infrared absorbing gases, Earth would be so cold that nothing would live here. It would be all frozen. Instead, we have a good balance of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and CO2 is one of them. What that means is that as heat bounces from the surface of the Earth back out towards space, CO2 and other greenhouse gases absorb some of it, and then they re-radiate it out from their molecules. And radiating means it goes in all directions from the center of a molecule. Some of that means it comes back down toward the surface. Result is that it's going to warm the surface a bit, and it's going to cool the stratosphere a bit, because not as much heat gets back up to the stratospheric level.
Right.
All of that is basic physics. But you know, basic physics also tells you that if you drop a rock and a feather at the same moment from the same height, they're going to hit the ground at the same moment. Unless they're in air.
Right.
And especially if the wind is blowing, the feather might blow up into a tree and never come down. So the real world is a whole lot more complicated than basic physics. So the key question is, how much does CO2 warm the atmosphere? And a variety of computer models of the global climate attempt to answer that question. And out of the 102 CMIP-5, that's coupled, now I've forgotten what CMIP stands for, but it's Coupled Model Intercomparison Project, models of the climate. Of those 102, on average, they predict 2 to 3 times as much warming as actually observed over the relevant period. And out of those 102, only 2 predict the same amount or less warming than actually observed. All the 100 others predict more. That tells us that the models are wrong, that they don't properly simulate the climate system. If they're wrong, then they provide no rational basis for any prediction of future climate, and therefore also no rational basis for any policy in response to those predictions. So what we really need to do is to get away from depending on models and work much more from empirical observation, which is the real heart of science. And the empirical observation increasingly is telling us that CO2's warming effect is real, but very, very small. Probably in the range of 0.5 degree to 1.75 degrees Celsius for every doubling of CO2. And so far, since the Industrial Revolution, we've only raised CO2 content in the atmosphere by about 50%. It'll take till near the end of this century to fully double, and that doubling will perhaps have raised global temperature by 0.5 to 1.75 degrees. That certainly isn't harmful. It's basically good. The warmer periods in Earth's history have always been healthier for all ecosystems as well as for humankind, and we should welcome it.
Well, wouldn't it be great, though, if we could just get rid of gasoline and coal and we just went to solar and all the other things? Wouldn't that just be altogether better if we did what the climate change alarmists are telling us to do and just got rid of all this stuff and, maybe mostly go back to walking?
Yeah, because after all, solar and wind are free, right? I mean, sunshine is free and wind is free. So that means those should be the cheapest energy sources, and they don't emit any greenhouse gases. Lots of myth there. Coal and oil and natural gas are free too. The expense is in harnessing them and transforming them from their natural form to usable energy. And because oil, coal, and natural gas have on average anywhere from 900 to 1,200 times the energy density of wind and solar, therefore it is inherently less expensive to convert those, the energy in those, to usable energy, especially in the form of electricity, than it is to convert energy from wind and solar
Dr.
to
Beisner,
electricity.
Dr. Beisner, did you just say 900 to 1,200 times more?
More energy per unit.
Wow.
Yeah, it's called energy density. And so the fossil fuels are inherently less expensive. They're far more reliable. Of course, the wind isn't always blowing, the sun isn't always shining.
Yeah.
And you need for a stable energy grid, for a stable electric grid, you need extremely concentrated and extremely consistent power. You can't get that from wind and solar. So the more you put of wind and solar into an electric grid, the more you're going to have to back it up by electric generating plants using coal or natural gas or nuclear, because otherwise you've got an unstable grid. You're going to have blackouts all the time. You're going to have brownouts. And of course, those things fry all kinds of different electronic equipment. So, if we want to see people enjoying the benefits of abundant, affordable, reliable energy, which goes into everything that we do, whether it's raising and harvesting and transporting and cooking food, or making clothing or shelter or transportation, everything we do requires energy. If we want to enjoy the benefits of that, then we need to not turn away from the most abundant, affordable, reliable sources and go to diffuse, expensive, and unreliable sources.
Yes, yes, exactly. And I'm sure that the people in California right now who are experiencing the blackouts probably agree a lot with you right now. They're not enjoying camping out very much. So that's very, very important. So Dr. Beisner, I really, really appreciate all you've done so far just to give us sort of a starting point to launch from. People can go to cornwallalliance.org to get more information. Do you have any specific talks that you would encourage or places that you would have somebody land? Like if I was coming into this right now with just nothing, what would you direct me to in terms of a talk you've given or something that I should be reading? What do you think I should start with?
Well, we have a DVD video called Climate Change and the Christian that I have given in a number of different places. It incorporates PowerPoint slides, gives all the major scientific and economic, and for that matter, ethical and theological arguments. That's available in our online store. We have a number of other videos and books and booklets available there. A wonderful one is called Global Warming Skepticism for Busy People. It's by Dr. Roy Spencer, who is a senior fellow of the Cornwall Alliance. He's a principal research scientist in climatology at the University of Alabama in Huntsville, and an award-winning NASA climate scientist.
Nice.
And he just really explains in clear layman's terms in about 104 pages, a really wonderful little book, why the fears of dangerous man-made global warming are unjustified and why it makes no sense whatsoever to spend the roughly $70 to $140 trillion that it would cost over, from now to the end of the century to implement the Paris Climate Agreement, when even if those guys are right, the ones who support it, the actual result of that would be only a reduction of global average temperature in the year 2100 of 0.3 of a degree Fahrenheit. That's $23.3 to $46.6 trillion per tenth of a degree Fahrenheit in temperature reduction. And I don't think it's real surprising that the author of the book, The Art of the Deal, thought that was not a good deal.
Yeah, not a good deal, not a good exchange. All right. Well, Dr. Beisner, you have been a real gift to us tonight. Thank you guys so much, or thank you so much. I want to encourage everybody who's watching right now to go to cornwallalliance.org. Check out more from Dr. Cal Beisner. Dr. Beisner, thank you so much. I look forward to having you on again sometime.
Okay, great. I'll be glad to do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, brother. All right, guys. Thank you guys for staying with us. Next week with Jeff Durbin. We'll be right back. Luke the Bear's going to be here, and we're going to have a conversation about all of this and wrap it up together in biblical worldview. Nice, beautiful package. So stay with us. Don't go anywhere. Be right back.
At the Ezra Institute, we are focused on training the current and next generation of Christians to lead in their families, churches, workplaces, schools, and every area of culture, and to do so with a full-strength confidence in the truth, beauty, and goodness of the gospel of Jesus Christ. We think it is critical for Christians to understand that a battle for the direction of culture is upon us, and that we are all in that battle whether we want it or not. The Apostle Paul tells us that the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ. If God has given us weapons, the implication is that He expects us to need them and to be using them. Now, as in the Apostle Paul's day, rebellious arguments, opinions, and thoughts are running unchecked in our culture. Systematic unbelief is being applied in every realm, seeking to destroy everything in its path, whether that be churches, families, individuals, or God-honoring institutions and traditions. This idolatry needs to be confronted by hearts and minds turned to the living God in true worship, applying instead God-honoring beliefs in every sphere. At the Runner Academy, we arm and train emerging leaders to do this very thing by providing comprehensive biblical worldview training in the Western heritage, the relationship of Christ to culture, what it means to be human, and the true meaning of freedom. This 2-week program seeks to equip the next generation of Christian leaders to live out their calling in a way that truly honors Christ as the Lord of all things, especially in areas like medicine, law, politics, education, the church, business, and the arts. These spheres have a powerful influence on the direction of culture, and there is a biblical vision for all of them contained in the Word of God.
The Runner Academy is hosted at the EICC Centre for Reformational Culture, an environment that provides a healthy balance of work and rest, and that stimulates creative discussion for engaging with and shaping culture to the glory of God. On this 24-acre farm and retreat centre, delegates can expect to find challenging teaching, but also fun and fellowship with like-minded Christians who are concerned to recover a vision of God's glory, and who are committed to think through what it means to live the Christian life in all its fullness.
Apply today and get equipped to face the critical issues of our time with a deep, rich, and joyful confidence in the Lordship of Jesus Christ over all life and culture.
I want their faith to not just be something that stands, but something around which culture can be built.
We want students who can think critically about arguments, but also about the culture around them, that can then speak clearly to it, and that also have the ability to influence and shape because of the power of their message. Because that's really what the gospel does. The gospel throws down all the arguments against it. It speaks to the hearts of people, it influences, and it changes.
Go to apologiastudios.com, get signed up, partner with us in All Access. You get all of the radio programs, you get the TV show, you get the after show, including Apologia Academy, and you partner with us in ministry, bringing the gospel around the world. All right, guys. Hey, welcome back to Next Week with Jeff Durbin. Thank you guys all for watching and for sharing and for liking and hitting all the buttons and all the rest. Encourage everybody right now who is watching, go to... where can they land right now? There's so much that's happened with it. So go to endabortionnow.com, brand new website.
It's beautiful.
Actually, it is very beautiful. There's going to be all kinds of stuff going there. But go to endabortionnow.com. You can watch the new film, Babies Are Still Murdered, here on the website. You can also watch it on Facebook. You can watch it on YouTube. Praise to God is that we dropped the film, and in the first 24 hours, over 100,000 views. So praise God for that.
Awesome.
And thousands of shares. So we were able to break through at least Facebook's algorithm. YouTube, maybe not so much. YouTube, you can see it's slow going and hard to push, but it is what it is, but
Yeah.
God really blessed it. And at one point during the live stream on Facebook, we had almost 2,000 people watching.
Yeah.
At the worst time you could drop any content is when we dropped it.
First thing in the morning.
Yeah, because we wanted to make sure it was there all day long. So we took the risk, and God really, really, really blessed it. So if you haven't seen it yet, I encourage you all to go see the film Babies Are Still Murdered here. Again, on all those platforms, Facebook, YouTube. It's here on this channel that you're watching right now. I think it'll really bless you. So it's been a big month for us. And lots of big things happening. 2020 is going to be a big year for us.
Oh, yeah.
All kinds of things already in the works.
It's already getting crazy.
All things. It's really encouraging,
Yeah.
and it's a blessing. Some of it is just incomprehensible in terms of what God is doing.
Yeah.
And I think for me, the most incomprehensible part of it is that we didn't plan any of it. So that's
No.
kind of cool. So let's talk. We just had a great explanation
Yeah.
of really the foundation and grounding of what can make sense of caring about the climate at all,
Right.
caring about earth and stewardship at all. I love how he really provided that grounding that a lot of people might just skip past and say that as Christians, we have a basis to actually care about humanity and the next generation.
Right.
Humanists, pantheists don't have a grounding, a justification to be concerned at all.
Right.
And so that, let's take back that capital. Thank you. Yeah, you can no longer borrow that money. It's ours. And I love how he talked a lot about the climate in terms of the coal discussion and the energy discussion, and how these climate change alarmists are really actually going to create financial distress upon the next generation, and they're actually going to destroy our ability to actually have power,
Right.
energy.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah. So this is Luke the Bear, guys. By the way, did I introduce you? I think I did. Everyone knows who you are. Everyone, he said, "Woo."
Yeah, one fan. Thanks,
Yeah.
Wade.
Bear. I see you have your cards there right now. So
I
before we
do.
get into the discussion that might be helpful to everybody. What are we talking about?
So I'm glad you ended with talking about the rolling blackouts. That's what I wanted to talk
Rolling
about.
blackouts in
California and New York.
And
both.
New York? I didn't even hear about that.
Both of them, yeah. And
Really?
do you know why they're happening?
Because they're liberal states? No,
Well-
sorry. No.
Well, ultimately, yes.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So basically, there's like different climate stuff going that's actually happening, not some pie in the sky climate change stuff that's actually happening with the climate. And they're afraid of like forest fires and all this stuff. So like when the winds pick up, they're actually shutting down people's power for a little bit of time until the winds stop or whatever. And I heard people for like 3 or 4 days even they were without power, like in California, I think. So anyways, it's just crazy, and it's those two states right now. And basically, the reason this is happening is because they're essentially denying energy to their consumers due to these renewable energy mandates that they've placed on these states.
Okay.
So it's because of the liberals.
Okay.
Because they've placed these stupid renewable energy laws in place. And so they're actually having to shut off or deny natural gas utilities to customers because of these mandates. And I just read an article, and it was interesting. It was saying that New York is actually creating more carbon dioxide and pollutants and emissions because of this.
Because of power shutdowns.
Because of everything they're doing, because of all these laws, they're actually
because of the laws they all have in place. Okay.
and all this, yeah, all of it combined, they're actually creating more of what they're saying they're eliminating.
Oh, I see.
And I saw another article while I was looking for this, and so Cuomo now is also blaming hurricanes, superstorms, and tornadoes on climate change because he said they didn't really used to exist.
Oh, I see. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So those two states, they're in a lot of trouble right now, and it's because they're not. They have the ability and the option to actually get natural gas.
Yeah.
They can build the pipelines. They have access, but they're denying it because of these stupid laws that they've placed on themselves.
Yeah.
And now all their people are hurting and without power.
Yeah, the liberal mindset, socialist mindset, the neo-Marxist mindset that's really popular today.
Yeah.
Is really something that destroys communities, culture, society. I mean, and morally, and then fiscally,
Exactly.
and then, of course, environmentally.
Yeah.
And so what they pretend to actually be trying to preserve is the very thing they actually end up actually destroying.
Right.
And so that's a powerful thought.
Yeah.
And I really, it was interesting to to listen to Dr. Beisner talk about these different pillars that they try to talk about in terms of biblical worldview as the grounding, the gospel, and then I really thought it was interesting that he actually added to that their concern for economic development.
Right.
And he, of course, was talking about the issue of energy and coal and the difference between, in terms of the effectiveness of coal and solar power.
Right.
Not that solar power couldn't be good in instances, but I did think it was interesting. He talked a lot about, he was talking about capitalism underneath that, in reality. And it's interesting because, well, going back to the whole issue of like the liberal mindset, liberal ideology, is that there's a pretending of we care about people,
Yeah.
we care about our children, we care about our children's children, we care about the single mother, we care about the family that has a lower income. And so what they say in terms of how we're going to help that is we're going to steal money from other people through mandate, through law.
Yep.
We're going to steal your money and take your property to actually care for them. But all they have to do is look at what that's done in all of the different categories and communities that they've already done it with.
Mhm.
As they've stolen money away from me and you and I, and given it away to all these other people over here, has it created entrepreneurs? Has it created new businesses? What has it created? It's created people who are dependent.
Exactly.
It hasn't created people who are independent,
Right.
but they are actually dependent. And it hasn't created jobs and new businesses and all the rest. So it's interesting, again, it's just the mindset of like, we're going to solve this problem, but because they don't have the scriptures as their foundation,
Yep.
they end up going the other direction and creating like more pain, more
Right.
human suffering. Whereas the biblical worldview provides a grounding, like Dr. Beisner said, about caring about the earth at all, but also the biblical worldview cares about the future in terms of building wealth, like building wealth.
Mm.
So it's interesting, like we don't, as Christians, want to pursue riches in terms of like that's the thing, right?
Right.
It's idolatry. Like we're not supposed to say like I want to just be rich and wealthy. That's the thing of my whole life is to be rich and wealthy. However, when you actually follow biblical principles and you build society upon God's law, you develop wealth.
Yeah.
You develop actually riches.
Yeah.
For people, individuals, communities, societies. Think about it in this way, just like in this one aspect. Like one of the things that God does is He builds the family.
Mm.
So the family is that unit, that first community you're a part of, and that family unit is supposed to extend on to the next generation. But that family community is supposed to be a community that cares for one another. It has authority itself. It has discipline. It has love. It has concern for one another. But also has like the whole element of the father is supposed to be the provider, right?
Mm.
He provides for the family. He raises up, disciplines, teaches, corrects, equips. But he also financially feeds,
Right.
provides covering, and he sends his children out like arrows into the world, right? So for the first part of your community, your father is the provider. He's the one pouring into you financially and caring for the family, and he's building. And he's supposed to be responsible, and he's supposed to have concern for making sure that he can provide for his family. So there's fiscal responsibility, and there's also like an establishing of like the mindset of like, I need to do well, I need to produce, I need to actually be able to care for. But as you get older, the dad starts to go downwards in his ability to do those sorts of things. But he's already supposed to have established something. Maybe he has a house. Maybe he has retirement. Maybe he has some cars. Maybe he's developed some kind of wealth. When he dies, well, before he dies, the family in God's order is supposed to care for the elderly
Exactly,
parents.
yeah.
So God's order commands the children to actually now flip the role and start providing for the elderly or aging parents and providing for them. But what's interesting is that God actually says in His law that the person's wealth, like your wealth when you die, is supposed to go to your children.
Right.
Right? So it's interesting is this family community where it starts to establish and build wealth. In God's order, He says, now when you die, that wealth and all that stuff that was built up, that capital is supposed to go to your children. Now what do they get? Now they get a kickstart.
Exactly.
Now they get a kickstart of wealth and finances to do what? To buy land, to create things, to be entrepreneurs, to build businesses, to do what? To now establish more wealth.
Right.
And it's a cycle that's supposed to continue. So if you follow God's order, actually all economic development is supposed to go upwards, but it starts upwards through the family.
Yeah.
And it begins to grow and develop and blossom because the family unit and distribution of wealth happens voluntarily in the family.
Yeah.
But if you take the idolatrous notion of the state being God, and you take what people want today in terms of like Demas, we the people, and like all, you know, we'll do this, and the state will provide for everybody. What do? Now they become the firstborn. Because what happens now in the state when you and I die? Because we've turned away from theonomy, God's law. Now when you die and I die, who's the first person that gets a check?
Uncle Sam.
Uncle Sam. Because what do you have now? You have this wicked notion of death tax, estate tax. So now, who's the firstborn? It's the state,
right?
Right, and the state takes now that firstborn's money.
Yeah.
It takes it away from my family unit, which was used to establish wealth and productivity for the family in my community that I've established. And now the state says, no, we're the family, the ultimate family. You give to us, and we'll distribute your wealth as we see fit, and we'll give it away. So what have they done now? Now, instead of actually taking money that could go to actually establish more wealth in a family and create financial responsibilities in individual communities, now the state just takes the money and irresponsibly just throws it out, gives it to somebody who's maybe not going to do well with it, distributes it across the board in ways that they really shouldn't.
Right.
And so, like, that's just an example of what I mean in terms of the future and, like, the biblical worldview, God's law, providing for the future, children, grandchildren. But especially, I think, in this, let's just talk just for maybe a few seconds even. When you think about the future, I'll ask you this. When you think about the future and how the biblical worldview actually gives us a proper perspective of the future and like a concern for the earth, we obviously have a particular eschatology that we believe that God has a concern for the spiritual and the physical order.
Right.
And there's not like a higher level of the spiritual and the lower is right? Like sin and yuck and Gnosticism, right? Like Gnosticism. That's a popular view for Christians today. So what would you say to people in terms of like, no, I have an answer of like a meaningful way to look at the future? What would you say?
Well, it's funny you're asking that because what we're talking about with this whole climate change nonsense is a form of eschatology.
Yeah.
It is an end times position.
Yeah.
And so like you see them, you know, all these doomsday prophecies, you know, we only have 5 more years. And so what they're trying to do is preserve the earth, but they're not trying to preserve the family. They're saying we should kill our children. They're taking our money. So there is no wealth for the future. So they're what they worship is the earth and an extended view of the earth. And it's the exact opposite of what you're talking about. And but we're saying no, like if we do this properly according to God's standards, like I'm thinking 2, 3, 4, 5 generations down the line where I want my great grandkids to have what you're talking about, stability and wealth. And we're not thinking the earth's going to end in 5 years. We're thinking it could be thousands of years. And then, you know, that's without getting too far into that, but that's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm looking forward to is building a better place for my kids and so forth and so on.
So and like with just as an example, with our perspective of the future, we actually think that we have a long way to go.
Yeah.
Because the perspective that Scripture gives is the kingdom of God on earth.
Right.
Here.
Exactly.
As Christ is ruling over the world, as He restores all things, all things are put into subjection to Him, and He brings all the nations to God, and He puts all His enemies under His feet. 1 Corinthians 15. And then the last enemy is death. So
Right.
it's every enemy, then death. When I look across the landscape today, I'd say we have a long way to go.
A lot of enemies.
A long way to go.
Yeah.
We have a lot of enemies hanging around,
Yeah.
right? So all those enemies need to go under Jesus' feet, and all things go into subjection to Jesus. So we would say we probably have a very long time.
Yeah.
Could God bring some amazing reformation in the next 100 years? It's possible, but is it...
Kanye.
Yeah, maybe Kanye. So with that perspective, if you and I have a long-term vision of the future, like if we say, hey, you know, it could be another 20, 30, 40, 50,000 years, that scares some Christians. They don't like
Oh,
that.
yeah, no.
Because what does it force them to do? It forces them to start actually thinking about their life now and their children and their great-grandchildren. And your perspective changes. One of the things I've heard so much from people who really start to listen to the prophecies of the kingdom and the future and the victory of the Messiah is, I just had a guy tell me this the other day. He said, Jeff, I want to thank you for teaching faithfully on this and bringing my attention to these scriptures. He said, my whole life has changed. And I just smiled. I just smiled. You know, and he said, no, I don't think you understand. I said, no, I know, I do understand.
Yeah, I get it.
He said, no, everything about how I see my life, my family, my kids now has changed.
Yeah.
My business, my future, my kids' future. I'm thinking about that now, and I care. And I'm trying to actually now, like invest in that.
Yeah.
Spiritually, in the physical realm, all that stuff, which I think is so great because it does change. It alters your perspective.
Absolutely.
And bro, I think it does impact in a powerful way. Like, I think we should care with the victorious view of the future about all the plastic building up in the oceans.
Yeah.
Because if you think the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, we're supposed to be responsible with it. If you think about that, then you should care about all the trash in the oceans. You should care about actually building more sustainable energy things and methodologies. You should care about the earth actually looking like a garbage dump, right? Because how did God, he made us where? In a garden, right? Something beautiful, we cultivate, and it's glorious. And so, God didn't create Adam in a trash heap.
Right.
He created him in a garden and told him to go, be fruitful, multiply, subdue, and fill the earth. And he tells him to cultivate this world. And so I think that Christians, particularly with a postmillennial eschatology, have actually a pretty solid grounding to have a perspective of the environment that is really beautiful and rigorous. So, yeah, there you go. I got our cameraman throwing his fingers up at me the whole time. Leroy will not let it go. All right, guys. Thank you guys for watching. Next, it's Isaac. It's Isaac Benegas. He's our man. All right, guys. So thank you for watching Next Week with Jeff Durbin. We'll catch you guys next time on Next Week with Jeff Durbin. And I encourage everybody to go to endabortionnow.com to get more information, get the free training, get the free resources, and join with us as we work to end abortion now in our world. Thank you guys so much for watching. Catch you guys next time.